They call me Earl McKenna. Been married to the sea for more years than most folks have been married to their spouses. Out here, you don't measure time in birthdays. You measure it in tides, in the scars on your knuckles, and in the faces you remember that the ocean decided to keep. This story, well, this one's different. It's the one I only tell when the fog is thick enough to hide my face and the whiskey is strong enough to loosen my tongue. It's the story of the catch that should never have been. The old diesel engine of the sea wanderer coughed to life like a man stirring from a long, troubled sleep. It's a sound I know better than my own. That engine and we've been complaining about the morning chill together for 35 years. My bones creak in harmony with the boat's aging hull. We're two old relics held together by stubbornness, rust, and a fair bit of varnish. I guided her out of the sleeping harbor, the water as black, smooth as polished slate under a sky beginning to blush. Most of the other boats, the big commercial rigs, fancy sonars and crews of young men who think fishing is a video game, were still tied up. They go where the data tells them. I go where the quiet calls me. There ain't much money in it for a man my age, not anymore. The quotas, the fuel costs, the market flooded with farm-raised fish that taste of nothing. They've squeezed the life out of us small-timers. I don't go out for the money. I go out because the land has gotten too loud, too crowded with ghosts. My Miriam, she's been gone 7 years now. Onshore, every corner holds a memory of her. The scent of her rose bushes, the worn spot on the porch swing where we'd sit, the quiet in the kitchen. But out here, the sea is big enough to hold all that grief without it overflowing. It's a conversation between me, the waves, and a lifetime. That morning, something felt different. A restlessness in the air, a pull in my gut that I've learned not to ignore. Instead of heading for my usual grounds, familiar ledges, cod and haddock congregate, I turned the bow south toward a place most fishermen avoid. We call it the Leviathan's Tongue. It's a deep-sea canyon, a black gash, a continental shelf that plunges down into God knows where. My granddad, Thaddeus, used to spin yarns about it. He claimed it was a place where the water was so old it had forgotten. He talked of ghost fish, creatures of immense size and strange light that lived in the crushing dark, remnants of a world before Noah's flood. I'd always listened with a boy's wonder and a man's skepticism. Granddad had a poet's heart and a fisherman's gift for exaggeration, but the pull was undeniable. It was as if a string was tied to my soul and something down in that dark water was gently tugging. The sea wanderer chugged along, the sun now a brilliant orange smear on the horizon, turning the waves to molten copper. The familiar shoreline faded into a hazy line, then vanished. The gulls, my constant squawking companions, had turned back an hour ago. Out here, the solitude was absolute. The only sounds were the thrum of my engine, slap of water against the hull, and the low moan of the wind. The water itself changed. It went from the familiar murky green to a deep, unsettling cobalt, then to an indigo so dark it felt like you could fall in and never stop. I cut the engine. The silence that rushed in was deafening. It was a heavy, ancient quiet. I prepped my gear, my hands moving with the slow, sure economy of 50 years of practice. I wasn't fishing for sport. This was my deepest, heaviest rig, a reel the size of a dinner plate, spooled with 1,000 yards of braided line, thick as a bootlace, ending in a steel leader and a hook that could have snagged a small car. It was my hopeful rig, the one I used when I was feeling lucky, dreaming of a record-breaking tuna or a monster swordfish. It felt right. I baited the hook with a whole squid, a pale, ghostly thing in the dim light. I said a quiet word to Miriam, a habit I'd never broken, and let the line go. The weight plunged, pulling the line from the reel with a steady, hissing sound. It went down and down and down. I watched the line counter on the reel click past 200 yards, then 300. It kept going far deeper than I'd ever fished this rig before. At 450 yards, almost half a mile straight down, it finally slowed and stopped. I locked the reel, placed the heavy rod in its holder, and waited. The waiting is a meditation. You become part of the boat, part of the sea. You feel the gentle swell lifting you, the subtle shift the current pushes. My mind drifted. I thought of my first catch with my granddad, a small pollock that felt like a whale to my 8-year-old arms. I thought of the day I asked Miriam to marry me right on this very boat, her laughter ringing out over the water. I thought of the storms I'd weathered, the friends I'd lost to this beautiful, cruel. The sun climbed higher, warming the weathered skin on my neck. An hour passed, then another. The only action was a lone albatross that circled the boat once, its immense wingspan blotting out the sky for a moment before it soared away. It was close to noon when it happened. There was no strike, no violent jerk you get from a marlin or a shark. It was more subtle, more profound. The rod, a thick stalk of fiberglass and graphite, simply began to bend. It was a slow, majestic curve, as if an unseen giant deep below was gently testing the line. I grabbed the rod, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. I braced my feet against the transom. The line was humming with a tension I had never felt before. It wasn't the panicked, high-frequency vibration of a fighting fish. It was a low, powerful thrum, a bass note that resonated through into my arms, soul, my boot. I muttered, my voice small, foreign, vast, empty. Snagged on the bottom. I put the reel in low gear and tried to crank. The handle wouldn't budge. It was like trying to winch the continent itself. I tried the old trick, slacking the line for a moment, and then snapping the rod up hard, hoping to jerk the hook free. The rod bent nearly double. The line stretched bar taut, but the hook didn't move an inch, except it did. Slowly, deliberately, the line began to move. It wasn't being pulled from the reel. The entire boat was being pulled. The Sea Wanderer began to pivot, its bow turning to follow the direction of the line, and then we were moving, being towed out to the deep by whatever was on the other end. My breath caught in my throat. I've been pulled by big fish before. 1,000-pound bluefin can give you a sleigh ride a mile or two. But this was different. This wasn't panicked flight. There was no thrashing, no change of direction. It was a calm, inexorable, powerful pull. It felt intelligent. It felt like I hadn't hooked a fish. It felt like I had hooked the seabed, and the seabed had decided to go for a swim. I looked around. The coast was long gone. The sky was a perfect, empty blue. I was alone, tethered to a mystery in the abyss. A cold dread, mingled with a strange, exhilarating awe, washed over me. Granddad Thaddeus's stories of ghost fish no longer seemed so fanciful. The slow, grinding protest of the reel began, a sound of mechanical surrender as, inch by agonizing inch, the creature in the dark began to take line, pulling me farther and farther from the known world. The battle had begun, but it wasn't a battle of speed or fury. It was a contest of endurance against something ancient, something that had all the time and all the power. And the sun was beginning its long, slow descent toward the horizon. Sun, that great and glorious clock in the sky, began its slow. It bled out across the horizon, painting the clouds in hues of bruised purple and fiery orange. An artist could spend a lifetime trying to capture a single sunset like that and never get it right. For me, it was a warning. Darkness out here isn't just the absence of light. It's a present. It fills the spaces, swallows distances, and leaves you feeling like the last man in a dead world. And I was still being pulled steadily and surely into its heart. My body, a vessel of 70-odd years, was screaming a language I knew too well. The muscles in my back and shoulders were a tight, burning knot. My hand, gnarled and scarred from 1,000 cuts and 1,000,000 coils of rope, were cramping around the cork handle of the rod. Sweat and sea spray had dried on my face, leaving a tight mask of salt. Every hour I'd wedge the rod in the holder, my arms trembling with exhaustion, just to work some feeling back into my fingers and splash some water on my face from the bait well. But I never let the line go slack, not for a second. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a partnership, a grim and silent dance. It pulled, I held, it rested, I breathed. Hours dissolved into a meaningless flow. The world shrank to the groaning of the fiberglass rod, the high-tension hum of the line cutting through the water, and the rhythmic slap of waves against the sea wanderer's hull. As the last sliver of sun vanished, the stars began to prick the velvet darkness. Out here, with no city lights to wash them out, they weren't just specks. They were beacons, fiercely bright and impossibly numerous. It felt like I'd been towed to the roof of the world. It was in that profound, star-dusted silence that I started talking to it. Seemed the natural thing to do. When you're alone with a force of nature, you can either go mad or you can get formal. "All right, old friend," I grunted, my voice a rough crackle in the night. "You've had your fun. Dragged an old man clear across the county line. I expect we're in a whole different time zone by now." There was no reply, of course, just the relentless, steady pressure. "You know," I continued, finding a strange comfort in the one-sided conversation, "I've been at this a long time. I've had blue marlin that fought like demons, giant tuna that nearly spooled me, even a great white once that took a whole halibut off my line and looked at me like I owed it an apology. But you're something else entirely. You don't fight with panic. You fight with weight, with time." I leaned back, using my own body as a counterweight, my worn-out boots slipping on the deck. A memory of Miriam surfaced, clear as the day it happened. We were on this very boat. Not long after we were married, I'd hooked a big tuna, and the fight had lasted 3 hours. When I finally got it alongside, I was so spent I could barely stand. She'd put a cool cloth on my neck and said, "Earl McKenna, you love the struggle more than the fish." She was right. It was always about the conversation, the brief, violent connection to that other world beneath the waves. "She's gone now, you know." The words were carried away by the wind. "Miriam, best part of me. Before the sickness took her, I made her a promise, a silly old man's promise. I told her I'd hang up my rods for good, but not before I caught one last fish. Not the biggest, not the most valuable, but one for the storybook, one that would make even my granddad Thaddeus tip his hat." My throat got. "I guess I'm telling you this because, win or lose, you're it. You're the one." The last chapter, as if it understood. The pressure on the line changed. For the first time in nearly 12 hours, it eased. It wasn't much, just a slight slackening, but it was enough. Hope, a dangerous and foolish thing, flared in my chest. I scrambled for the reel handle, my tired hands finding their rhythm. Crank and lift, crank and lift. For every 10 feet of line I gained, the creature would take back 5, a slow, powerful surge, dragging its immense head through the water. But I was gaining. Foot by painful foot, I was raising a secret from the abyss. The moon had risen, a perfect silver dollar in the black, casting a shimmering path across the water. The sea around the boat was alive with phosphorescence. Tiny sparks of green fire stirred up the current. An hour of this new struggle. My arms felt like lead. My vision swam with exhaustion. But I couldn't stop. I was a man possessed. I was winning back the line, yard by yard. 300 yards, 200. The angle of the line grew steeper. It was no longer pulling me forward, but pulling straight down. It was close. At 100 yards, I saw the first sign, a deep, pulsing glow in the water below. It was a soft, blue-green light, like a gas lantern seen through a thick fog. At first I thought my tired eyes were playing tricks on me, but it grew stronger, brighter, as I cranked. It was fish. The fish itself was making the light. My heart hammered. This wasn't right. No tuna, no swordfish, no shark I'd ever seen or heard of glowed. My granddad's tales of ghost fish, echoed in my mind, the words no longer feeling like fantasy. 50 yards. The glow was now a distinct, large shape beneath the surface, moving with a placid grace that belied its power. 20 yards. I could feel the water displacing, the boat rocking gently as the unseen mass shifted below. I braced my gaff hook lying on the deck, forgotten. I didn't want to fight it anymore. I just wanted to see. Then, with sound, was less a splash, placed water. It broke the surface. It rose into the moonlight. World stood. Wasn't a monster, marvel. It was immense, longer than my 14-foot beam, thick and ancient. Its scales were not the silver of a game fish, but the deep, metallic blue of a blacksmith's tempered steel, each one the size of my palm and edged in a faint, luminous light. Along its flanks, rows of phosphorescent pulsed, slow, hypnotic rhythm, in an ethereal glow on its fins were not fishes, lobe, almost like primitive limbs, and they too glowed with same, but it was the head, the eyes, that truly stole my breath. Its head was armored, ancient, a thing from time before men, and its eyes, they were huge, round and silver, and they held no fear or panic. They held a serene, weary intelligence, an intelligence that had seen the crushing pressure of the abyss, that had existed in cold and darkness for millennia. It looked at me, at my little boat, at the strange, noisy world of the surface, with a calm, profound indifference. My hands fell away from the rod. I stood there, bathed in the cool moonlight and the creature's own ghostly radiance, and I felt a wave of awe so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. My mind frantically searched for an explanation, for a name, and then an image from a dusty old book my granddad kept on his shelf. A book of strange sea life, fossil records, flashed in my memory. A drawing of a prehistoric fish, the living fossil, believed to be long extinct. But this was no coelacanth like the ones they'd found off Africa. This was its ancestor, its king. The book had called it a myth, a legend based on oversized fossil, Coelacanthus magnus, the king of the abyss, declared extinct for centuries upon centuries. The duel was over. I had hooked a ghost. I had brought a legend into the moonlight. And as it lay there beside my boat, its gills working slowly, its ancient eyes blinking in the unfamiliar air, I realized the impossible fight wasn't the one with the rod and reel. The truly impossible fight was the one that was about to begin inside my own soul. For a long time, I just stood there, my muscles screaming, my mind a quiet, echoing hall. The only sounds were the gentle lap of water and the soft, rhythmic puffing of the creature's gills. It lay alongside the sea wanderer, a living island of impossible light, and watched me with an eye that seemed to hold all the cold, silent history of the deep. There was no struggle left in it, only a profound and ancient weariness. My first thought, the one that hit me like a rogue wave, was fame. I saw it all in a flash. Earl McKenna, the old salt who rewrote the biology book. I pictured the newspaper headlines, the scientists in their white coats crowding the docks, their faces a mixture of disbelief and envy. I imagined my name spoken on the evening news. My boat, the humble sea wanderer, would be a museum piece. It was the storybook ending I'd promised Miriam, the ultimate validation of a life spent chasing shadows beneath the waves. This creature was my legacy, my proof to a world that had largely forgotten men like me, that the old ways, the old instincts, still held a potent magic. I reached for the gaff, my hand moving out of instinct. My fingers brushed the cold steel hook, the tool of my trade, the final word in any argument between man and fish. But as I looked back at creature, the vision of fame soured in my mouth. I wasn't looking at a fish. I wasn't looking at a specimen or a trophy. I was looking at a survivor, a relic that had outlasted the dinosaurs, that had hidden in the crushing blackness while empires rose and fell on the sunlit surface above. How many of them were there? Was this one of a small, hidden community, or was it the utter solitude of my suggested, the very last one, the last king of a forgotten kingdom? My discovery wouldn't be a celebration, it would be an invasion. I saw the second wave of boats, not humble fishing vessels like mine, but massive research ships. I saw them dragging the Leviathan's tongue with nets fine enough to catch ghosts. I saw submersibles with glaring lights chasing the darkness out of the last sacredly quiet places on Earth. They would probe and map and collect, and in their hunger for knowledge, they would destroy the very mystery they sought to understand. The ghost fish of my granddad's tales would be captured, cataloged, dissected, its magic bled out under a microscope. This quiet, majestic corner of the world would become a circus, and I would be the man who sold the tickets. The promise I made to Miriam echoed in my head. One for the storybooks. Was this what she would have wanted? For me to drag this ancient wonder into the garish light of the 21st century? To have it die in a tank or be pumped full of formaldehyde for a museum display? No. Miriam had loved the sea for its wildness, for its refusal to be tamed. She knew that the best stories aren't the ones you nail to a wall. They're the ones you carry inside you, the ones change. The real storybook ending wasn't about the world remembering my name. It was about me honoring the soul of the ocean. My hand recoiled from the gaff as if it were red hot. My gaze fell upon my filleting knife, its wooden handle worn smooth and dark from my own sweat and the oils of 1,000 fish. It was an old friend, a tool of precision and, in its own way, of respect. I picked it up. Its weight felt different in my hand now, not a tool for taking life, but for granting it. With joints that groaned in protest, I knelt at the gunwale. The creature's great silver eye was less than 2 feet from my own. I could see my own tired, weathered face reflected in it, a tiny man under a vast, starry sky. I don't know what it saw when it looked at me. Maybe just a strange shape, a warm-blooded anomaly in its cold world, but I like to think it saw something else. I like to think it understood. "You're the one, all right?" I whispered, my voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. It was bigger than sadness, bigger than joy. It was reverent, the story of a lifetime. But your story doesn't end with me. I leaned over, the knife in my trembling hand. The line, stretched taut as a harp-string, was as thick as my little finger. It was built to hold a monster. I placed the keen edge of the blade against it and began to saw. It was tough, the braided fibers resisting with incredible strength. For a moment, I feared my exhausted arms would fail me. I put my back into it, gritting my teeth, the blade grating and singing as it bit deeper. Then, with a sharp crack that echoed across the silent water, the line parted. The release of tension was so sudden, I nearly fell backward. The rod snapped upright, freed from its impossible burden. The creature lay still in the water for a beat, as if it couldn't comprehend its freedom. Then something happened that I will carry with me to my grave. Its rows of bioluminescent lights, which had been pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm, suddenly flared all at once into a brilliant, dazzling blue-green. The light was so bright it illuminated the entire side of my boat, and for a heartbeat, night turned to spectral day. It was a flash of pure, unadulterated life. A salute, a thank you, a farewell. Then, with a majestic, unhurried sweep of its powerful tail, it turned. It slid beneath the surface, its light retreating lantern in the deep. I watched it go down and down and down, the glowing shape shrinking until it was spark, and then, like a dying ember, it blinked out, and it was gone. I was alone again. The moon, the stars, the gentle swell of the sea. The deck was empty. My line was cut. There was no proof, nothing to show for the longest day and night of my life except aching bones and a memory that felt more like a dream. I started the old diesel engine. Its familiar grumpy cough sounded like a welcome home. I turned the sea wanderer north and began the long, slow journey the world would never know. I returned to the harbor at dawn with an empty hold, just another old fisherman who'd had an unlucky trip. the other fishermen would ask. And I'd just shake my head and say, they weren't biting. They say a man is the sum of his story. I suppose that's true, but maybe the best story, the one that truly defines you, is the one you can never tell. It's the secret you share only. I didn't bring back the impossible catch. I became its keeper, and that, I think, is a legacy my Miriam would have understood. The greatest trophies are not the ones we display on a wall, the secret we choose to protect. True reverence for nature lies not in conquering it, but in having the wisdom and humility to let it remain wild, mysterious. My stories are all I have left. If they mean something to you, consider subscribing. It keeps an old man's memories fading into the fog.